One thing that all of us writers of fiction will have to admit at one point or another is that nothing we can write can truly match the stories of reality. Part of that is due to written or drawn fiction just not being able to fully capture the complexity of something like a world war or all the intricacies in other conflicts, and put that into a digestible narrative form. But the biggest thing holding us back is that our stories need to make sense, need to be believable. While reality, well, does not. There are just so many things that have actually taken place on this wacky, wonderful world of ours that are so improbable, so dramatic, that we really could not make them up. At least not without readers or viewers scoffing at it being quote-unquote too convenient or too ridiculous. And yet it has happened. And for the best, since something happening in real life does allow us to write similar things in our stories. As long as it's done well, of course. But while reality has many, many truly amazing stories to tell, getting that to general audiences in a way that is engaging and dramatic enough to get them both fully invested in the events as a story and to appreciate and connect with the subjects of those stories is another matter entirely. Documentaries can work, particularly for history nerds like me, but many people can't get into that format. So then we have the next level down, dramatizations, or something based on a true story, which, when done well, can be good, though they can also fall well short. This task is obviously all the harder when the historical subjects of the story, or stories, you wish to tell aren't humans capable of communicating or recording their experiences. So no memoirs and no interviews. And yet Umamusume has pulled it off, multiple times now, and succeeded probably beyond what even they would have expected in terms of the type of people the franchise has been able to reach and have a positive impact on. Because as anyone who's done even cursory research knows, the franchise, in particular the anime and manga, does about as good a job as is possible to retell these incredible stories in ways that respect the real stories of the racehorses involved, while also building a coherent narrative with near-human characters to make it more relatable and accessible to us humans. Before we get further into this though, here's your spoiler warning for some stuff from the various shows. Though as we'll discuss later, this franchise is also kind of unique in that it's one where spoilers, certain ones at least, honestly don't really matter all that much. So let's take a bit of a look into just how they pull this off and what it ultimately means. The most obvious, apart from obviously using the real names of the key horses for the characters and the designs taking inspiration from the real horses and jockey outfits, is in the races themselves. It's hard to understate just how much the franchise has outdone itself with these. Umamusume is probably the only sports drama franchise where you can spoil yourself on the outcome of the relevant sporting events in the series by looking up the real-life race records, which is amazing. And yet, even if you do spoil yourself, it doesn't really detract that much, if at all, from the in-anime races, since the production does such a good job with everything else as well. Being able to keep the key races almost completely accurate to life in terms of how they play out, with some caveats like replacing horses whose names they don't have the rights to with others, really helps connect both realities, and in particular gets the anime fans to go watch the real versions. It's eerie, in a good way, hearing the two combined together, and seeing just how closely the race commentary matches, along with the race flow itself. Many of you are probably familiar with the phrase, necessity is a mother of invention, and that applies to creative endeavors too. The limitations you have to work within can force you to get more creative with what you do and how you do it, and lead to a superior final product. So how exactly do you recreate races that in real life are horse plus jockey, and keep the flow, strategy, etc. correct, and portray something like Super Creek's stunning Kikuka Show victory, or Obey Your Masters, Real Life Pay the Butlers, Japan Cup win? Well, we've seen how it's done. And it's true to the history, while also being peak entertainment. Another thing that makes the franchise great is how it compensates for the obvious limitation of the horses being, well, horses in real life, and in most cases not having ready-made IRL relationships with their peers in the way human athletes would. Umamusume turns this into an advantage by finding ways to tie their stories together, utilizing what bits of real-life interaction certain horses and jockeys had, where they can as well. The single best example of this is probably the twin Turbo Tokaiteo subplot from Pretty Derby Season 2. Obviously, Turbo and her one-sided rivalry with Teo is an anime creation, but it was done to allow the anime to depict Twin Turbo's real-life win and tie that into Teo's story, providing her with inspiration to give racing another go despite her repeated injuries. And that got us one of the moments in the franchise that hits the hardest emotionally. But what makes this franchise stand out from most other gacha franchises, or just generally franchises about insert thing here being turned into cute anime girls, is how indelibly tied to history it is. Sure, we have things like Azur Lane and Kantai collection that anthropomorphize warships and feature references to the real histories, along with additional references in the game or anime story to some incredible moments from history. But it's nothing on the level of Umamusume, which leans very, very hard into dramatizing or reimagining the real stories of these racehorses' careers, and honoring them as best they can. Another difference, of course, is that the horses who inspired the girls in Umamusume were real, living things, and not inanimate objects, so it's a much easier, shorter jump to turn them into people. Horses, unlike warships, who have distinct personalities after all. And recreating racing is easier than recreating wartime battles, where many of the involved ships did not survive. And since we don't have the real accounts of the main inspiration here, though we of course do have interviews and statements from the jockeys, trainers, etc., but that's more removed, you can't compare the dramatization to the real story in the same way that we could compare something based on human sporting exploits. In those cases, a strong argument can be made that documentaries always do the job better. Here, that isn't an issue. And on the other side of things, fictional sports dramas are a dime a dozen. And while they of course can be very compelling and well written, they're just that, pure fiction. For me at least, there's something about watching these shows that are works of fiction, but based on and recreating real events that leave much more of an emotional impact than even the best fictional sports drama. Translating the stories of these horses into a format that mirrors the challenges and struggles of human athletes, and most importantly, telling those stories and handling these themes well, just hits hard. Personally, as a history nerd and someone who is both a fairly casual sports fan and an amateur athlete, Umamusume really just hits all the right buttons to get its hooks into me. And my wallet, though I personally won't be betting on horse races anytime soon. Umamusume is far more than just another gacha franchise, where some set of non-human objects are anthropomorphized into anime girls. Sure, a series like Azulane, Kantai Collection, which I mentioned earlier, and Girls Frontline take some design and story cues from the real-life versions of the ships or guns the characters embody, but they just don't feel like as much of a genuine love letter to either naval warfare or guns as the stories in Umamusume feel to the horses and jockeys involved, and the sport of horse racing in general, where that's a core component and not just a bit of extra flavor. And obviously, like we mentioned before, it definitely helps that the jump from horses, one living thing, to people, isn't as big as ships, but it really is more than that, and that shows through a large portion of the audience and player base. These stories are real. The heartbreaking losses and injuries, the historic wins, and more. And it also serves as a way to give a sort of second chance to horses whose careers were tragically cut short. And as we established earlier, real-life drama will always, in the end, top anything that one of us writers can concoct fully whole cloth as a fiction. I think the single biggest sign of how successful the Umamusume anime have managed to capture the drama of these horses' stories is that you get the same emotional impact watching the in-anime races as you do when watching the real-life ones, no matter which direction you come from. I won't deny that I felt a little emotional watching some of the IRL versions of many of the races I first saw in the anime, or which even just feature horses that have been made into characters in the franchise. And on the other side of things, it could also hit fans of the real-life horses as hard too. See, for example, a 70-year-old Japanese fan of horse racing for decades, who legit teared up a little bit watching Teo's final race in the anime. Horse racing, I've come to realize, is a rather romantic sport, in the classical sense of the term, given the sort of inspirational drama it can create. From Special Week's historic Japan Cup win, to Teo's miracle run, to Ogre Cap, Kida-san Black, and Orphe, who I really hope we get an anime focusing on at some point, winning the Arimakinen as their final retirement races, or Stay Gold winning his first G1 in his final race. It's practically pre-scripted drama, at least in terms of key moments, and so from there the challenge for the production team basically becomes crafting a coherent, compelling, dramatic narrative around that. It certainly helped get me to appreciate a sport that I previously had no real interest in. Barring a way to actually interview the horses as you would people involved in historical events, there really is no better way to make this history real, and we see the dividends, between people, both in Japan and elsewhere, getting a newfound interest in and respect for the sport. These are straight up inspiring stories we could all benefit from following. And we have also, of course, seen outpourings of support from fans of the franchise that helps the actual horses. To use a couple of examples since the release of the game globally, we have all the food fans sent to Haurara and others, and the contributions people abroad and in Japan have made to fundraisers run by farms in which many of the horses we've come to know and love have retired to. It's similar to what we've seen with shows like Girls on Panzer that helped save the real-life town of Ori, as well as the last surviving BT-42 tank. The franchise has brought genuine good to the world, and it wouldn't have been anywhere near as successful at that if it hadn't found the perfect way to make history real, and bring the drama of these horse races to us in perhaps a more accessible way. And the best part of Umamusume is that there will never be an end of worthy stories to tell, through this lens of anime horse girls. Between older stories we haven't yet seen given center stage yet in anime or manga form, like that of Simboli Rudolph, or Fev, or Vodka and Die with Scarlet, just to name very few, or even more modern stuff, like the dominant careers of Almond Eye and Equinox. And just this year, right after Forever Young won the Breeders' Cup Classic, for the first time for Japan, the game immediately teased a new Uma that is highly believed to be Forever Young. And Forever Young's owner, the CEO of Psy Games, the company behind the Umamusume franchise. So between that and the fact that the Umamusume franchise has sponsored many major horse racing events worldwide, ensures that this silly anime franchise about horse girls is going to be indelibly linked to the real sport that inspired it for a long, long time to come. All this to say that you really should give the Umamusume anime, at the very least, a try. And the game too, but I know gacha games aren't for everyone. As for where to start, I'll leave that up to you, since each anime and manga installment largely stands on its own just fine. Don't sleep on this, it really is that good. Have you also fallen in love with the Umamusume franchise, either since the global release of the game or sometime earlier? And do you have any further thoughts on just how well it translates real events into a fictional drama about racing horse girls? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and like to support me in what I do here, my books and light novels are all available on Amazon. And you can get early access to videos, sneak peeks, and updates on my upcoming manga and other projects by subscribing over on Patreon. I also offer channel memberships, which give you access to monthly members-only watch-along streams. And of course, if you have any thoughts on this video, or if there's anything else Umamusume related you'd like me to talk about, or if you'd like to watch me play the game again on stream, then by all means let me know as well, and share that in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and while I might not get to respond to every comment, at least not in a timely manner, I can guarantee that I read each of them. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any future uploads. That's all for now, so until next time.